Welcome to Nights at the Movies, a movie podcast with Paul Miller and Leslie Heimbaugh. Leslie, welcome back for episode number 4.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk about this.
Well, so one of the things that so far on our first 3 episodes, we talked about how we got into film. We ranked our top dramas and comedies. And then, of course, in our last episode, we really took a critical look at the cinema industry and how we think that they're going to adapt, evolve, and really will they survive the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we're going to go in a little bit different of a direction. And I can tell you that in our next 2 episodes, we're going to take a look at 2 different auteur directors that we're both huge fans of. First, today, we're going to be talking about Chris Nolan, and on our next episode, we'll be talking about Quentin Tarantino. We're going to rank these films, but how we're going to do it today is we're going to go film by film, and we're going to talk about some observations that we have about those individual films. We will chime in with where we think that they rank in our top 10. So before we get started, we're going to sort of set the ground rules here. First of all, anyone who is a fan of Chris Nolan may or may not know this, actually. So he started off, as many of these auteur directors do, with an independent film, very, very, very low budget, and it was called The Following in 1998. We are not necessarily going to talk about that one because that's a film that, number one, a lot of people probably haven't seen, and number two, I actually haven't seen in quite some time. I did see it years ago. I would say probably around when Dark Knight came out, which, oh my gosh, can you believe Dark Knight came out 13 years ago?
I know.
Where does the time go? But so we're going to avoid that one. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to talk about his films in order, starting with Memento, then Insomnia, Batman Begins, Prestige, Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, Inception, Dunkirk, and Tenet. So we're going to start from the beginning, and then we're kind of going to work our way back through, and then we'll kind of talk about where they come in our top 10 for Chris Nolan films. So in our previous discussion, we talked about Tenet quite a bit. We will have a chance to talk about that, but let's start off at the beginning with Memento. Came out in the year 2000. I cannot believe it's been that long. But Memento. So let's start off. Where does that come in on your top 10, Leslie?
Ooh, it's pretty high. You know, it's pretty high up there. I'm going to put it. I didn't really number mine very well, but I'm going to say that it's probably 3. Yeah.
I actually have it at number 2.
Yeah, might be for me too.
I absolutely love Memento. So Memento was his first, I don't even want to say big budget movie because it wasn't by any means. In fact, he put it together in a more independent fashion, and it definitely aesthetically not quite what some of his other films were. Only a budget of $9 million.
Wow.
Here's the thing that I find really interesting about Christopher Nolan. Other than the Batman films, his earlier films did not do overly well at the box office. In fact, worldwide gross for Memento, $40 million. Now, hey, of a budget of $9 million, $40 million, that's not terrible, times 4, but it's had a ton of run. Now, what this movie was about was Guy Pearce was in a horrific attack, and he lost his short-term memory, meaning that he could remember everything up until a certain point when the attack happened. But after that, couldn't create new memories.
Right. So
what happened here, and this is really a good look at how Nolan does his movies, multiple timelines. There were there was a forward-running timeline and a backward-running timeline.
Right.
And it's really interesting how this was put together, because the reason why Nolan filmed the movie this way was because he was trying to simulate what it was like to be this man.
Right.
And because he had it run that way, we didn't know, we could pick up on stuff, like if we saw a bullet hole or if we saw a broken window.
Yeah.
We could pick up on that, but we wouldn't know why. And Leonard wouldn't know why either.
Exactly. It moves in reverse to kind of mimic that strange affliction of having no short-term memory. So you get a bit, and then you back up, and then you get a little bit more. It's really fantastic the way it comes together.
And I think that, honestly, Memento for me is, again, it's one I haven't seen in a little while, but it's one that when I saw all of these movies do this to me, and this is when I can tell what a good movie is for me personally, is when I get out of that movie if I am still thinking about it.
Yeah, if you instantly want to go look something up to see what in the world. Yeah.
And, well, and even back in 2000, while, of course, the internet was around, it wasn't, let's just say, content on films wasn't so pervasive, like external content to the film. Obviously, you could look up, Siskel and Ebert's reviews and things like that. But now, for example, for Tenet, which we'll talk about, I talked in the last episode about Screen Rant. Screen Rant has like 8 different episodes, like 15-minute episodes on Tenet. And like that's what's interesting to me. So we had to do more reading, maybe even just watching the movies again, trying to pick up on it for ourselves. So I think, again, this is one, if listeners out there have not seen this, make it your number one priority to go see this movie as soon as, I don't know why I said go see the movie, but you can watch this one in your house. Again, came out in 2000. I also am going to just give an overview of the IMDB rating of each of these films. Memento clocked in at an 8.4.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to point out that your top of the mark IMDb movies are low to mid 9s. Mm-hmm. So this is very, very high up in terms of the quality of this film. What are some other thoughts you have about Memento?
Well, it's in now that, because I hadn't ever really seen the whole movie, and now knowing that you can't really, he called it, Nolan called it his sociological pizza delivery theory. If you miss the first 3 minutes of Memento, you miss the whole thing. So he's talking about when the pizza delivery guy comes, if you don't pause it, you're gonna walk away for 3 or 4 minutes and you're not gonna know what happened, but you're probably not gonna be lost. This is not that kind of movie. You literally have to pay attention from the opening credits through the end of it. And I just thought it was really his first time. Now, in retrospect, you can see his first time doing this, the time inversion. To watch how he has evolved with this start, and this start is such a strong start. It just makes him just a fascinating storyteller to tear a movie apart this way.
And really, the movie ends or the begins at the end,
right? As
a lot of his films do, which we'll certainly talk about. But yeah, again, Memento is going to come in at number 2 for me. Leslie's also, we'll say 2 for Leslie as well. So definitely both high on our lists.
Let me just cover a few things I just wanted to say about it. Almost all of the dialogue during the black and white scenes of the movie was improvised.
Really?
I just found that stunning. Especially Sammy character. So if anybody's watching it, they'll see what I mean. Neurologists love Memento because the representatives from the National Institute of Mental Health deemed the movie close to a perfect exploration of the neurobiology of memory. And another neurobiologist said it's the most accurate portrayal of different memory systems in the popular media.
Wow.
So it's highly rated by people who know what this looks like. And then finally, another really fun thing is this, there's I don't know what his title would be. He'd be like a continuity professional. His name's Steve Gerke, I think is how you say it. He was best known before this for his work on There's Something About Mary, with the Farrelly brothers. But Nolan hired him to do continuity in this movie. And when you're jumping around like this, you can't afford to have mistakes. And he was so good at it that Nolan has kept him for every movie he's made since.
And to your point, I mean, you need them. You need somebody like this in terms of how the way that Chris Nolan does his films, you must have. I mean, that's probably one of the most important people on the whole set.
Yeah. Well, he had considered other people for the Leonard role, But it was interesting to me that he landed on
Guy Pearce.
Guy Pearce, his name went out of my head, because he was really unknown at the time, and but he turned out to be the perfect person to play that role.
I would say, and I was actually a Guy Pearce fan prior to this, and of course Carrie-Anne Moss of Matrix fame really blew up after that. But all right, let's move on to the next film in the Christopher Nolan arsenal, and that's going to be 2002's Insomnia, arguably the film that put Chris Nolan on the map. I mean, with one small, sort of self-produced film, The Following, and then, a good showing in Memento, comes back with a $46 million budget. In the United States, made $67 million in a cumulative worldwide gross of $113 million.
Wow.
And of course, two of our modern day's greatest actors, Al Pacino and Robin Williams, as well as Hilary Swank in there as well. So, this is a movie, I have to be honest, that I haven't seen in such a long time, that it doesn't really resonate with me the same as some of these other films do. What were your thoughts on Insomnia?
Well, the acting is superb in it. Al Pacino is super effective. It's basically The Undoing, I think, because it's light I think it takes place in Alaska, and it's light 24/7, and it's basically the undoing of people who can't live like that. And Robin Williams, this was an early performance where he was sort of shedding that crazy, funny man, but he did a really great job as this sort of creepy, very creepy and pathetic as a suspected murderer. But the drawback to this film is it really drags in many places. You're just like, come on. But it's still a good movie, but very, very low on my list.
So Nolan, and that's one of the big issues, I think, with Nolan moving forward. Okay, so right about 2 hours for Memento, right just under 2 hours at an hour 58 for Insomnia. Every other film is 2:15, 2:30.
Right.
And again, being such a big fan of Tarantino, I don't want to begrudge a long movie. I think in this one, and I think that's part of what you were saying too, to a point, that there were some really, I don't want to say dull, but there wasn't the amount of action. And again, that kind of goes against some of what we were saying in the last podcast. Like, we don't want action for action's sake. But because this was more of a psychological drama, there needed to be a bit more going on.
Yeah.
Even in Memento, there was a lot going on. There was chase scenes and action scenes, and this for me just didn't hold up. I actually have this coming in all the way down at number 9.
Yeah, I would say that's right where it is for me, too.
Just, again, before we move off of this film, I wanted to let you know that this is a 7.2 on the IMDb top out of 10. So, again, this is not necessarily one that seems to have a long afterlife. Did make over $100 million.
Yeah.
I mean, worldwide. I mean, that's great. About 70, 80 million in the U.S., Still, that being said, with the large budget, that doesn't really seem to be all that successful.
Right.
So I wonder what some of the thoughts were with that film after that.
Yeah. Watch it for the performances. That's what I say.
So again, 2002's Insomnia came in at a 7.2. Leslie and I are both going to put that in at number 9. All right, next up is going to be something that's really interesting. And this is really when Nolan gets into revise. I don't even say revising. I don't want to even necessarily call it rebooting the Batman series with Batman Begins in 2005. And I have to be honest with you. Again, at that point, like, I'd seen Memento. I loved Memento. I didn't really see Insomnia. And I got to be honest, Batman Begins was something that kind of just flew right over my head. I didn't see it at the theater. I do remember when I caught it, and I believe I didn't even watch it until after Dark Knight.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me, too.
I wonder why. I mean, it had a budget of $150 million.
Yeah.
Which is pretty insane for, 15 years ago.
Well, it's interesting to me because as soon as I hear action film, for the most part, I'm like, nah, forget it. But this was so much more. It had tons of action, but it was so much more than that. But I poo-pooed it right from the beginning.
So $150 million budget, $206 million in the U.S., cumulative worldwide gross at $373 million.
Wow.
Tons of fantastic press on it. Again, Batman Begins comes in at an 8.2 on IMDb. When I think back about it, I almost wonder where the $150 million went.
Yeah.
Because of all of the three Batman Dark Knight trilogy films, this is the one that, when you look at it on the surface, it didn't seem like the production value was fantastic, don't get me wrong, but it didn't seem like this was something that there was a ton of effects.
Right.
You know, I mean, it just didn't seem to me like I'm when I saw the budget, I was actually really surprised.
Yeah. You know, and I really didn't pay attention to how much it cost to make it, but I do love these because there's so much of a story going on with them, and that's what gets me.
What I think is interesting to me personally about this film was, and of course the whole trilogy, which we'll talk about as it goes, this is such a different imagination of Batman. And, you know, certainly prior to this, we're coming off of some of the most hokey Batman ever, you know, Batman and Robin with Arnold Schwarzenegger, George Clooney. This is going in an entirely different direction. And this, to me, one of the things, for better or worse, Christopher Nolan may have been the one that made Hollywood so superhero-centric with these films because they were so popular. And now we saw this is what a superhero film can be.
Right.
And, you know, I think arguably a lot of the Avengers films, a lot of the newer movies, this is sort of the feel that they're going for and just that more mature superhero film as opposed to some of the campiness that you saw with Tim Burton's Batman.
Yeah, I got a kick out of the Tim Burton ones, but...
Oh, I enjoy them for what they were, but nothing is near as, I don't even want to say complex, because certainly they were complex to a certain point, but at the same time, there was just something different about these films. And I wonder where Nolan would be today if he didn't do these films. Now, who's going to pass on the payday as basically their third major motion picture? I wonder why they went with Nolan too there as well.
I don't even have a guess for that.
No, I don't either.
Christian Bale is by far the best. There's not even comparison. He's the best Batman by a long shot for me.
He certainly gets a lot of critique about his voice.
Yeah, well, you can chuckle at it a little bit, but he drew me right in.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, Christian Bale, who had been in a ton of different things, you know, this was really his breakout film, too, in terms of being an A-lister. You know, he was always kind of that B-C-lister, but this was really when he really broke through to the mainstream, you know, obviously playing Batman here. And again, you know, with the trilogy that continues to move forward, that was really interesting. So Batman Begins comes in at an 8.2 on IMDb. All right, let's take a look at the next film here in the Chris Nolan universe. Is going to be The Prestige. This is from 2006. It was 2 hours and 10 minutes, and of course features Christian Bale yet again and Hugh Jackman. This one, I got to be honest with you, it had been a long time since I'd watched this, and last weekend, after studying all day, I decided that I was going to sit down and watch this, and gosh, it is just one of the, in my opinion, it's one of the best, Christopher Nolan or not. And this is honestly not a type of movie that I typically care too much for.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of period films, so this is obviously takes place in the early 1900s.
Yeah, my favorite though.
Yeah, not necessarily a huge fan of this. Not to say that I have an issue with it, but I got to be honest, this film, the way... This is where you really start seeing Nolan coming into his own as a filmmaker. Now, again, it's hard to say that coming off of a huge film like Batman Begins.
Right.
But that was good because it was something that we were familiar with and it was kind of a spin of it. This was an entirely new concept.
Yeah.
Though, you know, of course, a lot of it has to do with Tesla and some of his experiments, which I totally forgot when I was watching it. I mean, obviously you saw it in the opening credits. David Bowie.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I could not love this movie more. it's a guilty pleasure the number of times I've watched it, but it's such a deep, rich, even a little. It's not even confusing, but it just got so many good, surprising elements about it, and it doesn't disappoint the entire time. And then I won't give away the ending, but I'm telling you, the ending just about knocked me over. I could not believe that's what was happening.
So what's interesting is again, it's been such a long time since I've seen it, and I remembered certain things about it, and that's what's crazy is because he basically tells you exactly what's happening the entire time. Like you should
have figured it out, but you don't.
You should have figured it out. I think that's a very good way to put it, because from the beginning I'm like, okay, I see where this is going, and that's what I thought was really interesting. Like, how did I not realize this the first time around? Because I remember the first time I saw it. Yeah. There are several twists throughout the film, several twists, but the final twist is really, really, frankly, pretty shocking. Ugh. And not even in a bad way. It's just one of the most unique ways I've ever seen a film end, ever.
Well, and I sort of think that, the plot was intricate. It kept sort of going back on itself a little bit, and there were some red herrings in there, some things that sort of threw you off course a little bit. But it's another movie that I like on repeat viewings, because I think sometimes when you realize, you just want to go back. The first time you see it, you just want to go back and say, wait a minute, how did I not see this coming? It's just fascinating to me. I loved it.
So Prestige comes in with an 8.5, so far the highest of Nolan's films on IMDb. Just as a point of reference here, $40 million budget, only $53 million in the U.S. with a cumulative worldwide gross of $109 million. Again, kind of this pattern here. Okay, so, Batman aside, his films, at least so far, so we're talking Interstellar, we're talking Prestige, and then, there's some other ones that we'll continue to talk about, not really doing super well at the box office. I mean, if a studio is putting up $40 or $50 million, they're expecting $100 million U.S. gross.
Sure.
I mean, I think that's fair to say. And that's what kind of intrigues me about all of this, is that even after, so this is after Batman Begins, $300 million worldwide, and he still does not have yet the name that he's getting a huge draw just because of his name, the way that Tarantino probably does in the more modern age, and maybe even he did up until a certain point, certainly with Inception. But and that's to me what's so interesting, because this is so highly regarded, such a and it's approachable. I mean, I want to say it was rated PG-13. It's not like it was rated R or anything. Yeah, I mean, it's PG-13. There's a little violence, but nothing really crazy, and so this seems to be approachable. Maybe it would have been better served being an R-rated movie, because it's not really shooting for a teenage demographic.
No, it's definitely dark. But I don't know. I can't explain why it wasn't more loved, because I guess there's not that many explosions and there's obviously no car chases.
Just as a final point here, The Prestige comes in at number 47 in the top 100 films on IMDb.
Wow.
As the number 47 film in the history of film.
Yeah, that's saying something.
Absolutely. So, again, here's another one that and that also goes to show you how good Memento is as well, because if Prestige at 8.5 is coming in at number 47, Memento at an 8.4 is obviously not too far below there. There's a ton of movies in the 8.4s and 8.5s, so it's down quite a bit, but still, it goes to show you the quality of those films.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the next picture in Christopher Nolan's arsenal, probably one you've all seen, The Dark Knight. And so The Dark Knight was in 2008, so 2 years after the Prestige, clocking in surprising 2 hours and 32 minutes. Mm-hmm. I guess I don't recall it being that long. Dark Knight comes in at a 9.0.
Ooh.
And is listen to this, Leslie, the number 4 movie on IMDb in film history behind The Shawshank Redemption, The Godfather, and The Godfather Part 2.
Wow, that surprises me.
Number 4. That is that, and honestly, it's by itself. There's some 8 9s that ring in 12 Angry Men, Schindler's List, Lord of the Rings, followed by Pulp Fiction, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and The Lord of the Rings. Of course, Fight Club up there at number 11 too. So pretty impressive at number 4 all time on IMDb. Now again, there's a lot of different things that go into that, but where do we start with Dark Knight? Well, let's start off by saying it had a $185 million budget and a cumulative worldwide gross, Leslie, of $1 billion.
Wow.
$5 million. So I don't think that Warner Brothers is hurting after Dark Knight. I think they can eat the loss on Tenet a bit. But,
yeah.
So what was it about Dark Knight that really did it for you? And really, I remember this as being a film that it got to the point, it came out July 18th, it got to the point where later that summer, we were asking, let's go see it for a third or fourth time.
Right.
Or why haven't you seen it yet?
Yeah.
It's one of those types of things.
Well, for me, because I'm so much interested in actors, Heath Ledger, you just cannot beat it with that performance was it's probably one of the best performances of that, at least that decade.
What is interesting, obviously, and I don't want to go into a whole lot about this, but it's clear that the way that Heath Ledger got himself into this role directly impacted him losing his life. I mean,
Sure.
I think that's fair to say. And again, this movie came out 13 years ago. I don't think that I'm going out on a limb by saying that.
No.
But his performance here was just really out of this world. And again, like, that's what's interesting to me. Like, when you compare Batman Begins to Dark Knight, and you're thinking to yourself, Dark Knight only had about a $35 million budget, which is budgets for entire movies.
Right.
But, I mean, you can see in Dark Knight where the money went.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas in Batman Begins, you didn't necessarily see it as much, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, those innovative vehicles and things like that. I think like the Dark Knight Rises, the vehicles were just incredible. But I think the contrast between Heath Ledger's crazy wild performance and then seeing Christian Bale solid and wounded and tormented Batman. It just that just got me. That just got me.
Well, I got to say that when I think back to some of my... Now, again, we talked about the dramas last week, and of course, Dark Knight did not make my top 5. I would say that it's got to be in my top 10 at some point. Certainly, I have it coming in at number 3 for me.
That's probably... I should probably do a little switcheroo here and put... I'm probably going to put The Prestige first, and then Memento, and then Dark Knight, probably.
So I know I didn't mention this. I actually have The Prestige at number 5, even as much as I love it, at number 5 for me. So that was interesting. But yeah, Dark Knight, I have it number 3 behind Memento and my number 1 film, which I don't want to spoil just yet. But again, Dark Knight, Batman Begins to me didn't move the needle, obviously, the way that Dark Knight did. I think that Dark Knight couldn't have existed without Batman Begins. However, what I would also say is that Dark Knight changed film forever. Because what you start to see is, okay, so you remember that it came out in 2008. Really, okay, so you had Iron Man coming out at about that time. This is when you start seeing a lot of the Avengers films. This is where you start seeing some of the reboots of these superhero films trying to go in a different direction, emulating Christopher Nolan. So you could easily argue that Nolan was the one who changed film forever.
Right, I agree.
Because of that, and honestly, sort of to a detriment. As much as we love these films, we just got done talking about how we're sick of all these reboots.
Right.
Well, this is why they're doing it.
Yeah. He did. He started for sure, but there's nobody that's come close to a movie, for me, a superhero movie that's anything like these.
And I don't think anyone ever will again. I mean, he just set the bar so high, I just can't imagine how anybody could ever, in terms of superhero films, really peak here. And here's what's even more interesting, Leslie. So we talk about how this is number 4 of all time. I mean, this is a huge, massive blockbuster.
Right.
that still had redeeming qualities as a film.
Yeah.
That won Oscars, and that's what to me is so interesting. Like, you don't see, other than like at 15, The Empire Strikes Back, you don't really see a lot of big budget movies in that top 25,
Right.
even 50 on IMDb. Dark Knight's, arguably the biggest.
Yeah.
Of all time. So $1 billion worldwide, even 15 years ago with inflation. I wonder where that would be.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's so interesting.
All right, so moving right along, we are going to go to Mr. Christopher Nolan's next picture, which is Inception. Came out in 2010 and overall is an 8.8. So we've got a bunch up at the top. Just to hear again, just to explain how good an 8.8 is, Leslie, on the IMDb top films of all time, comes in at number 13.
Whoa.
Does Inception.
It was so wildly creative, just so innovative, and I think it's a tough movie to understand. You really have to take it apart before you can understand it. I wrote down that it's like each level of a dream happens at a different speed. So 5 minutes in the real world is an hour in dream time. And things slow down even further the deeper you go within the dreams. But anything that happens in one dream can affect another dream on another level.
Well, what's really interesting here, and I think we'll talk about this a bit more when we get into Interstellar, but it's very, very similar to the timelines on in Interstellar as well. One of the things that Nolan is frankly obsessed with is time, and one of the I recently purchased and have started to read. As you know, I've got a stack of books that I need to read, and now that I'm on break I have one class this summer, I want to try to read some of these books. But I have a book called The Nolan Variations, just came out last Christmas, and he talks about time and why he's so interested in time. And one of the quotes that I actually put into my paper was that he has an interest in time because everyone is on an even playing field with time, and that we all experience time at the same rate.
Right.
But then he kind of goes against that because, in Tenet, he's got people experiencing time forward and backward. In Interstellar, depending on the gravitational pull of a planet, you're experiencing time different. In Inception, depending on what level of dream you're at, the time changes. And certainly you could look back to Memento and how time is that is something that I find so interesting. And I wonder if it almost seems, though, that he tries to be too much.
Yeah.
And again, I love it, and I love to think about movies, and I love to analyze movies, but it almost seems like he's trying too hard.
Yeah. He's been criticized for not letting audiences, at least in the emotional realm, not letting audiences figure some things out for themselves. And, Inception and Interstellar, to me, they're two most emotional movies that he's made. And that, time has a different sort of characteristic in that you're running out of time. You're not going to be able to see someone again if things don't change, or you're trying to get back time that you lost with somebody. So it's a different It's shocking how many different representations time has in his movies.
Absolutely. So here, a budget of $160 million, a worldwide gross of $836 million. So again, another really, really, really successful picture for Nolan. Certainly one of the most interesting and one of the most thought-provoking, because you start and what was really interesting is right after this you started seeing I can't even believe it's been 11 years since Inception came out in 2010. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's insane. But when you think about Inception itself, this actually started sort of some interest in dream studies at the time, and I found that really interesting. And Leslie, if you are ever able to find, maybe at an old yard sale or something, the Blu-ray copy of this, on the second disc, there is a documentary that was made about dreams. It wasn't necessarily made by Nolan. It could have been. I don't know. But it's maybe about a 45-minute documentary. Super interesting.
Wow.
I still remember when I watched that because I've always been really interested in dreams myself.
Yeah.
I have Inception coming in at number 4.
Yeah, I have it at 5.
Yeah, so you're already Prestige for you is above Inception, whereas I have Inception first over the Prestige. That's the dogfight. That was the one that I really struggled with coming in especially because I just watched the Prestige and still love it so much.
Yeah.
But I will never forget the visual effects in Inception. I remember seeing it at the IMAX theater. And of course I saw Dark Knight at the IMAX as well. But honestly, when you see a film in these IMAX 3D theaters, it's unlike anything else. And again, I think part of the reason that I like Inception so much is because I did get to see it at the theater.
I wish I had. Yeah, the way the set, it appears to like rooms actually roll on their side or on their roof, and people are trying to travel through that space. It's so crazy and innovative.
Well, and what's really interesting, real quick, about Nolan is that he uses very, very little visual effects. He does most everything as much as he possibly can in real life. And in fact, with Tenet in the hangar scene, they actually ran a plane into a building. It's not like it was miniatures or anything like that. So he tries as much as he can to avoid visual effects and have as much of the effects be as real as possible.
Yeah, it's clear when you watch it. It's so the quality of the filming is just spectacular.
Okay, moving on to after Inception, and so between Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises was Inception, and it was about 4 years between Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. Dark Knight Rises came out in 2012 and came in at an unbelievably respectable 8.4. It was, oh my gosh, I definitely didn't realize this, 2 hours and 44 minutes.
It's long. It is long. I've just recently watched it again, and it is long.
Comes in at number 73 on it's amazing. People on IMDb love Christopher Nolan. The budget was, oh my gosh, $250 million. That's got to be one of the biggest budgets of all time for a worldwide cumulative gross of $1.081 billion. So actually a larger worldwide gross than The Dark Knight. Here's the thing. I've got Dark Knight Rises down at number 6. Again, I liked the movie. I thought it was really cool because they filmed in Pittsburgh, which I went to school in the Pittsburgh area, spent tons and tons of time out there. In fact, one of my friends still lives out there and said that he wasn't an extra or anything, but he knew a couple of people who were because they filmed at Heinz Field.
Right.
So, but this one to me, it just didn't have the same attitude as Dark Knight did. Again, I love it. I love all of Nolan's films, but it just didn't have the same attitude as some of the other films did. And again, it's still ranked really, really high, but geez, that 2 hours and 44 minutes, that seems like extremely long. And I wonder if maybe, and it's funny, I'm reading some of the user reviews, The Dark Knight Rises was the perfect sequel to the masterpiece.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like it. I have it at 8, so it's a lot lower on mine, but the it doesn't get enough credit for how effectively it captures the superhero's feeling of helplessness. I think that's...
Well, this one especially. Yeah. I think that with not only having to face Bane, but also having to face the femme fatale, also played to that. So he was really going against two people here. Of course, Anne Hathaway and, of course, Bane as well, Tom Hardy. This one was... You never thought he had a chance, against these two. And of course, I'm not spoiling anything because if you haven't seen these movies, where have you been for the past 2 decades? But of course, he does prevail in the end. Not by much, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
and being betrayed by his love interest. He finally gives in and falls in love with someone, and then bam, she betrays him too.
But again, when you talk about emotion here, and some of his films being a little devoid of emotion, this is one where there is all types of different, ups and downs in terms of emotionally. And I think that's what's so interesting about this is, you really learn a lot about the Bruce Wayne character. It's not just all about Batman. It's a lot about Bruce. And, at the whole beginning of the movie, he has gone into relative obscurity. And he's gone away from being Batman. And then things start progressing and Bane, comes to be in his massive scene at Heinz Field in the beginning of the film, and then that's when he feels compelled to don the suit again.
Yeah. Well, and Anne Hathaway is spectacular in this. That's one of my favorite, actually, of her roles. And I'm a big Tom Hardy fan. I thought that was fun what he did with that character. And you can never forget Michael Caine's presence
of course.
in this. He's just a beauty, and you just love
Morgan Freeman too.
Oh yeah, Morgan Freeman, classic. Yeah,
absolutely love both of those two. So again, Dark Knight Rises coming in at 8.4 on IMDb, the number 73 of all time. I have it at number 6, and you had it at number 8.
Yeah.
But then again, that just goes to show how big of fans we are here
right.
about this. All right, we are going to 3 more films left. We have Interstellar in 2014. Oh my gosh, 2 hours and 49 minutes.
That one I felt.
Yes.
I liked it, but I felt it. Yeah.
Absolutely. But again, Leslie, 8.6 at number 29. All these movies are in the top 100.
This is why he got money to make movies, you know?
Well, and we can certainly talk about that. So what this is basically, again, it's been a little while since I've seen this one as well, but basically what happened was they figure out how to travel through 2 different galaxies through a wormhole. And again, with the time here, so basically this kind of... There's actually been some talk that this movie and Tenet are interrelated because if you think about what the issue is here, it was climate change.
Right.
And the issue in Tenet, they don't really talk nearly as much about it as they do in Interstellar, but is climate change.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of fan theories. Now, who knows?
Yeah, sure.
And Nolan's never really come out and said anything about this, but fan theories talking about how these two are connected, or certainly at least thematically in terms of climate change. So the whole point is to try to find another planet for the human race to go live on. There's a lot of back and forth between some of the main characters here, and I really think some interesting interplay in terms of how the different characters work with one another. Still, there was something just a little off-putting to me about this. I don't know if it was the length that did it for me. I think that there were definitely some really, really cool parts to it. Definitely beautiful film.
Yeah.
But gosh... I just didn't realize that it was such a long movie.
The craftsmanship of Interstellar is off the charts. The score is probably one of Hans Zimmer's best scores.
And that's saying something.
Yeah. The production design was innovative and unique. You know, the time has many, many faces in this movie. And it's certainly probably the most emotional movie he made. You know, you really felt it. The kids were pissed, excuse my French. They were sick of him being away, but he had a bigger purpose, you know. And so that was an interesting pull, too.
So $165 million budget, only $188 million in the United States, but did have a cumulative worldwide gross of $701 million. So again, this is one that seemed to get a lot more run internationally than it did here in the U.S. But again, this comes in at an 8.6.
That's just
is
shocking.
The number 29 movie on IMDb. Now, again, I am using IMDb, so maybe people on here are a little more biased to Nolan, and you certainly could debate these top 100 lists. But again, these are based on, you know, a wide variety of different things, and I really do appreciate the way that IMDb puts their films together.
Right.
So I'm going to hand this next one over to you. Next, we're going to talk about Dunkirk in 2017. I'm going to be totally honest with everyone. I have never seen this film. And the reason is, and if you've listened to episode 2, you'll know, I do not care for war movies.
Right.
I will admit, having been out for 4 years now, I probably should have gotten around to seeing it. I will get around to see it. But just because of that, I mean, I have it all the way down at number 10 after having Interstellar coming in at 8. Did come in with a 7.8. Did win 3 Oscars. Talk about this movie a little bit for us.
Well, it's definitely the most hopeful picture that Nolan has directed. It's a retelling of the British evacuation of France in 1940, and it's the result of an early disastrous defeat against the Nazis. So there's 3 different sort of timelines of different lengths going on in the background. And there's definitely some surprising twists and turns in the story. But this one was Nolan really sort of let go of so much control over the emotional impact of and this is another very emotional movie. He trusted his audience more to get what he was doing rather than sort of hitting people over the head with some of it. And it doesn't have a lot of explosions. It doesn't have a ton of dialogue. There's not the strategic scenes of battle, as George Bush would have said, strategery going on. But, it's this heartfelt piece where, the people get their own boats out and rescue people with their own boats, and it's a very thrilling story. It's just, again, it's long. It's
honestly, though, Leslie, only an hour 46.
It feels long. And it feels, when you're used to his other movies where there's a lot of, it's not gratuitous action, it's action that's necessary. But this, there's a lot of personal, which I normally love, and there were a few characters that you really could work up some sympathy for, but not my favorite, but definitely a great movie.
Well, I've got it, again, just because I haven't seen it, all the way down at number 10, so that's probably unfairly ranked. I do want to make sure I watch this. A budget of $100 million and did generally pretty well, 189 in the U.S., 527 worldwide. Again, I promise the listeners I will make sure that I take a look at Dunkirk here before too long. Okay, which brings us to 2020's one of the most contentious films in terms of the way that people received it, Tenet. Here's what's interesting to me. Number one, I have this at number one. I love this movie. I'm obsessed with it. I've seen it probably 4 or 5 times now, and I actually am really frustrated in the feedback that it received in a lot of the reviews that it received. This was really one of the major sort of disasters in the film industry because of a $205 million budget. So by far his largest budget. Opening weekend, $9 million. $58 million worldwide. But Leslie, a cumulative worldwide gross in a pandemic of $363 million.
Yeah, you really can't be too sad about that.
Well, so that shows what kind of society we're living in terms of these major motion picture directors, that you're releasing this film in the middle of a pandemic and you're going to be upset that you only make $160 million.
Yeah. I feel bad for the number of people that didn't see it in a theater. I was one of them. This has theater written all over it.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
There is some definite criticisms that you can give. A lot of it is there's some, when you see it, the score, which is wonderful, is too loud.
Yeah.
It almost seems like the mix was bad. I wonder if he meant it that way. I'm assuming that he did. I mean, again, this is his 11th feature film with a massive budget. But I do get that. And then in the first scene, which does go on for about 15 minutes, because they're wearing masks, you can't really understand what they're saying.
I did see that.
There are some subtitles, but it's really difficult. But this is one where I'm shocked. It came in at a 7.4.
Yeah.
The next to lowest, other than Insomnia, Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
I don't get that either. I think it's such a stylish movie, that it's just beautifully done. And John David Washington, you can't do much better. He's so classy in this movie. And I don't even know the name of the actress that's in it, but I loved her too. I thought she was spectacular. But anyway, I loved the movie. I don't even know if I was gonna watch it until you
raved about
effused about it. Yeah, and then I did, and I was so glad I did.
It was again another long one, comes in at just over exactly 2 hours 30 minutes. But again, I don't want to go a whole lot more into it. Basically, they're trying to avoid the end of the world by trying to find and put together a weapon, but there's so much more to it than that. Definitely would highly suggest that you get out and watch this. But again, just really frustrated to the point that I wrote a 20-page paper about it, that it only got really a 7.4. And it's, again, I actually used Rotten Tomatoes, and it got a 7.0 on there.
Whoa.
Which isn't horrific, but for the quality of movie that this is, again, I think that over the last decade, we just, as a society, this isn't what we want, and I think that that's sad. It is what I want. It's what you want.
Yeah.
But it's not what the average moviegoer wants. And I'm sad that it did so poorly. I suppose I'm glad that it did as well as it did, because it could have been way worse.
Yeah.
But again, to your point, I wonder how many people really missed out on an excellent experience seeing it there.
I have no doubt about it. I'm sure there's going to be some way that they're going to get this out in front of people again. I know they've re-released it, but to me, it's like an anniversary edition will come out and people will get back and appreciate what they missed.
Well, top 10 for me, I had at number 10 Dunkirk, number 9 Insomnia, number 8 Interstellar, number 7 Batman Begins, number 6 Dark Knight Rises, number 5 The Prestige, number 4 Inception, number 3 Dark Knight, number 2 Memento, and number 1 Tenet. What do you have, Leslie?
I have 10 Insomnia, I have 9 Batman Begins, 8 Dark Knight Rises, 7 Interstellar, 5 Inception, 4 Tenet, 3 Dark Knight. No, 6 was Dunkirk. That's it. Okay, and then 5 Inception, 4 Tenet, 3 The Dark Knight, 2 is Memento, and 1 is The Prestige for me.
I'm actually pretty happy that our lists turned out very similar. Although, if you would look at them in the top 10 on IMDb, it would be Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, The Prestige, Dark Knight Rises, Batman Begins, Memento, and then Dunkirk, Tenet, and Insomnia. So we all vary a bit, but still. Yeah. Well, Leslie, I must say that this has been wonderful, and I appreciate taking a look at Chris Nolan movies. Next time, we're going to take a look at Quentin Tarantino movies. I think that'll be equally as interesting. And, of course, I've seen all of Quentin Tarantino's movies at this point. I might have to go back and take a second look at Inglourious Basterds, because I only saw it once.
Oh, you have to. I have to take a look at Reservoir Dogs again.
I would absolutely make sure you do that. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode at Nights at the Movies as we look at Christopher Nolan. Leslie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's going to do it for us. For Leslie Heimbaugh and Professor Paul Miller, we'll see you again next time on Nights at the Movies.